Chapter 1166, the scene is getting more lively. Hearing his words, on the contrary, joyful Palace Saintess still looked calm and a smiling expression crept up on her face as she said, activating the sky-blazing mirror will extract the user's power. As far as I know, even the Golden Core Living Buddha must be cautious when activating it. Miyagi himself could only activate it for 3 minutes in the past, as more than that will fully consume his Buddhist power. That makes me curious, Ki Kitagawa. How much of your power has been consumed now? Ki Kitagawa's expression turned stiff and his eyes filled with a haze. He wouldn't have used this sky-blazing mirror had it not been for Tang Xiu, who just disappeared, as well as that black-robed woman who could use an invisibility technique. The sky-blazing mirror, as the name implied, it had a very fearsome offensive ability and also a magical visualization effect. He wanted to figure out how that black-robed woman was able to stay hidden. If he caught her, he might be able to force that invisibility technique from her. Activate. A low and deep voice came out of Ki Kitagawa's mouth. A moment after, no single line of red threads appeared on the surface of the mirror. But the threads now covered the whole of the courtyard and even began spreading outward and gradually integrated with the blue-colored net and extended its range to a kilometer radius as well. No way. Ki Kitagawa's pupils shrunk and disbelief was evident on his face. He could sense the cultivation level of that mysterious black-robed woman. She was absolutely not a nascent soul cultivator but only a golden core one. She may be fast, but it was still impossible for her to escape from the scope of his range in just a short time. Does she have an acceleration artifact or something like that? Ki Kitagawa thought about it for a moment and finally concluded that it was the only possibility. A smirk appeared on the joyous Palace Saintess' face. After killing 2 men in black in the blink of an eye, she said, feeling restless now, Ki Kitagawa? They have escaped already. It's likely they're just laying low and waiting for both of us to get wounded. My main target is still you. Ki Kitagawa coldly hummed. As long as I can catch you, not only will that fossil monk fail his decades-long plan, I can also reap great benefits for myself. Those 2 escaping brats will be easy to track once I become powerful after I'm done extracting the energy in your body. Joyous Palace Saintess shook her head and said, You're mistaken. I'm not a female furnace. That thing is in your hand. You're really stupid. Ki Kitagawa loudly laughed. Really? You didn't even notice that something is wrong at all even at this time? Why do you think that old vulture has been giving you massive resources and protecting you like a treasure for more than 20 years? Do you even know what his real purpose is? Do you think it's because of your figure? You're all wrong. He's just waiting for the opportunity to mature in order to absorb the innate life force you've been cultivating. At that time, let alone your whole cultivation, even you won't be able to preserve your poor life as only death awaits you. Joyous Palace Saintess' expression turned extremely ugly and she yelled angrily, Shut the crap. Miyagi will never say such shameful things. Our relationship is like a father and a daughter. How could he possibly do anything untoward to me? He hasn't done anything to you, huh? That's simply because the time isn't ripe yet. You have yet to make a great success in your Frost Buddhist relic cultivation, to begin with. Ki Kitagawa jeered. What? The woman was incredulous and she stared fixedly at Ki Kitagawa. Her personal guards she brought were being slaughtered at the moment, yet she seemed to not realize it as she indignantly shouted, How did you know about the Frost Buddhist relic? You know my superior, don't you? Ki Kitagawa sneered. The Seijin Buddha, who's the deputy palace master of Joyful Palace. A great man with great power and a confidant of that old vulture. I overheard about it when he talked to Ian Buddha about a decade ago. Else, why do you think this jade cauldron is in my hand now? That's because Ian Buddha has always been watching you for that old vulture. A chill ran over Joyous Palace Saintess' body. She had been curious, doubtful, and suspicious all along. Why would Miyagi never touch her and even forbid any male to touch her? But now, Kitagawa's brutal revelation shredded all her previous fantasies. It turned out that the woman cauldron was not exactly that jade cauldron but her instead. She was the genuine one, or rather, she was just a tool. In order to strike another mental attack on the joyous palace saintess, Kitagawa grinningly said, "You're a holy lady, so you're far from being stupid. You must be able to think about it yourself. What exactly is this heavenly joyous palace? A paradise for men and women, a palace of joy where you can have sex to improve your power. But what about you? You're unexpectedly labeled as a holy lady, long decreed that it's forbidden to touch and someone not to be blemished. How come can you display any powerful cultivation art of joyous palace without having any intercourse whatsoever, yet your strength keeps enhancing all the time? Just thanks to all those cultivation resources, you think? Speak no more." The holy lady of joyous palace yelled furiously and stared at the four men in black, causing their dread. A short katana suddenly appeared in her hand and the sword tip instantly slashed forward for several meters away, completely destroying those four men. Kitagawa's mouth twitched a few times. He had secretly cultivated over 100 experts and spent nearly all his wealth over the years. Every death of his men gave him great distress, but this woman just killed 4 of them in one strike. More than 10 of them now had died in her hands, a loss that nearly drove him mad. Oi, saintess. That joyous palace's old vulture will suck you dry sooner or later. Might as well give yourself to me for cheap. At least, I'll spare your poor life given how beautiful you are, so you can be my slave. Not even a peaceful death is better than being alive." Restraining the anger inside him forcefully, Kitagawa kept speaking to make the woman fume further. He himself was very powerful and was confident in killing this saintess. But he was also aware this woman definitely had some life-saving measures and even some deadly trump cards. Had it not been for the potential threats around him, he would have gone all out to strike her and brutally catch her. But now, it was not an option. Hong, hong. A loud roar came in from the surroundings as the entire courtyard was hit by violent tremors as though it was a hit from a major earthquake. The sitting Kitagawa had a drastic change in expression. The first thing that came to his mind was that sage Buddha returned. He streaked up into the sky in a flash for tens of meters. His expression turned extremely ugly upon seeing a few people outside the big net. His guess was on the mark. They were not only Buddha but also 2 other most powerful combat generals under him, Yang and Yang. Full attack. He quickly bellowed and slashed down the broadsword from the air. A blade beam tens of meters long hit lightning fast to slay the joyous palace saintess. In the periphery, Buddha's expression enormously changed and he instantly unleashed an ancient bronze seal and bombarded the big net with it. The mesh was broken and he and the other 2 instantly dashed inside and appeared in the courtyard extremely fast. Bam! Even though the joyous palace saintess unleashed everything she had and was able to defend herself against that violent blade slash, the impact of the huge force still injured her and sent her flying at the wall, creating a hole on it. Without any shred of hesitation, Buddha ordered a kill command and the 3 men armed with Buddhist artifacts began slaughtering the men in black. The trio was very powerful as Buddha himself had power at the early stage of spirit formation, whereas the other 2, Yang and Yang, were at the mid-stage of nascent soul. With a constant throbbing heart, Kitagawa almost cried in distress and burst out a terrifying aura. A loud, roaring sound came from the unique vessel in his hand as it went straight into the sky. For a time, Kitagawa was as though turning into a tiger that stormed over toward Buddha. He had shown a very weak power in the past, far below even those 2 men under Buddha. But his momentum and aura this time were simply fearsome. His speed was lightning fast and it took him but a flash to deliver hundreds of blade strikes. Mortal enemies as we are now, you can go to hell first now, fossil monk Ine Buddha. While blocking Ki Kitagawa's strikes, Ine Buddha grimly grinned. I didn't expect you to be hiding so deep all this while, Ki Kitagawa. Miyagi did remind me to investigate any dissidents and traitors before, but I've never found any clues. It's you who turned out to be the one who has been targeting the Joyous Palace these years. Ha! You all are just remnants of the Buddhist sect from China. Do you really think the Japanese do not know you've been secretly growing your power here all this time? The plans General Fukuda made to target your Joyous Palace have been set on motion. You just wait. You all will be exterminated and none of you will live at that time. Ki Kitagawa fiercely shouted. General Fukuda? Eyes overflowing with killing intent, Ine Buddha shouted back fiercely, that old shit has been in our way for years, yet Palace Master never did anything to him since he didn't want to invite troublesome issues. Now I can see it. You turn out to be General Fukuda's running dog, huh? Nippon Banzai. After dodging Ine Buddha's counterattack, Ki Kitagawa found that a few figures were coming over from the horizon in the distance as he burst out laughing. In the mid-air several kilometers away, Tang Xiao and Tang An were staying hidden in the midst of the clouds and watching the fight in the distance. Tang Xiao felt a bit apprehensive about Ine Buddha before, but now he found that he had looked down on cultivators from Japan. China had formidable cultivators, and it was also similar to Japan. Lots of people are coming, Grand Master. Tang An's expression slightly shifted all of a sudden and she quickly pulled Tang Xiao's sleeves. Following the direction she was looking at, Tang Xiao shifted his vision in the other direction. The scene was rather a shock for him, since he saw several thousand of agile people similar to a tidal wave approaching fast 6+ kilometers away from the scene where Ki Kitagawa and Ine Buddha were fighting. Chapter 1167, To Act and Take It or Not. Tang Xiao's heart throbbed faster as incredulity covered his face. Never did he dream that a small country like Japan boasted such an expert. Observing the strength of these few thousands of people, most of them had reached the qi refining stage and many were on par with foundation establishment cultivators. Don't tell me all the cultivators in Japan are coming here? Lips twitching a few times, Tang Xiao's eyes fell on Tang An's bronze mask. They look weird somehow, Grand Master. Tang An shook her head. Take a close look at their faces as well as their running trajectories. Something strange? Tang Xiao was slightly stunned and then carefully observed the few thousands of experts running fast below. His mouth twitched again a few times as he indignantly hummed. Humph. They're genetic warriors. Most of these people have taken beast gene injection. Just look at their running posture, which is similar to the beasts. God damn it. How come Japan is so abnormal and perverted to think that someone transformed so many people like this? Based on my understanding of the Japanese, the people of this country kind of divided into two contrasting types. One has a very proud character and the other has an inferiority complex. The proud ones are very arrogant and tend to stop at nothing, even resorting to brutal and cruel methods to pursue their purposes, whereas the latter is the timid kind, struggling to survive in society. But it is due to these circumstances that people with these two types of personality will likely be twisted, should they find a chance like this. I can guarantee most of the Japanese will be willing to be injected with the genetic agent and become a powerful genetic warrior, if it promises them formidable strength. A frosty light flashed in Tang Xiao's eyes as he coldly hummed and said, Humph. Human is human and ghosts, monsters, as well as demons are of their own kind. Those genetic warriors are neither. Only some brutal savages. I'll make sure to get rid of these genetic warriors when I have the ability later. I think these genetic warriors are Japanese, Grand Master. They are very likely here to deal with the Joyous Palace, Tang An softly replied. Besides, our chief purpose in coming to Japan is to help Kawako become the most powerful person in Japan. The more either of them dies, the easier will it be for Kawako to control this country in the future. Tang Xiao approvingly nodded and said, True that. They are in a dog-eat-dog situation, so let's just watch the fun. Nothing will affect us even if both sides perish. But there's something that will affect us, Grand Master. Tangan interjected in a low voice all of a sudden. Huh? Something can affect us? What could it be? Asked Tangxiu in surprise. That joyous palace saintess mustn't die, Grand Master, Tangan replied in a whisper. Tangxiu slightly furrowed his brows and asked, why can't she die, though? She may be a virgin and has some looks, yet she's still one of Joyous Palace people. We may opt not to kill her and some others from the Joyous Palace, but those Buddhist sect's old monks in the mainland definitely will never let them go. Didn't you hear it too before, Grand Master? Tangan argued back. That saintess is a woman cauldron of furnace. You can improve your cultivation if you take her body. Cut the nonsense, reproved Tangxiu. Tangan shook her head. Grand Master, I can tell that these people's strengths are on par with nascent soul experts, and can even contend with those at the spirit formation stage. I suspect that Joyous Palace's master has even more profound cultivation and is much stronger. Why can't you take the furnace that works even for that man? That female is just a tool, nothing more. It's better to have your power leap further than giving her to others for cheap and let her die for nothing. No can do. Tangxiu shook his head. That's what the demon is doing. The action of cultivating a female furnace is already a demonic deed, but to you, it's like some recycling process. Tangan questioned his decision. You. Somehow, Tangxiu couldn't understand what kind of thoughts filled Tangan's mind. People did say a woman's heart was deep like the ocean. He truly couldn't make head or tail of what Tangan just raised up. However, all the confusion in his head was cleared away by her next statement. You indeed have very powerful strength, Grand Master. But you also know that going further in cultivation is more difficult. Your current strength should be at the spirit formation stage, and even those at the same stage won't be able to match you. Yet, I do think you must seize any opportunity for you to step further and break the shackle of this plane. Master told me that we have enemies in the immortal world. We may be strong enough, but so are those enemies of ours. That's why we must speed up our cultivation and cast away our slackness. It's all the more reason that we must seize every opportunity before us. Even if what? Tangxiu frowned. Even if your relationship with your other women end up sour and bitter, said Tangan in a deep voice. Tangxiu deeply sighed and shook his head. I can get where you're coming from, then. I really do. But improving my power using this method is really something I can never do. We're going to improve, and some means are just meant for us to use to achieve that. But resorting to this kind of demonic deed is a big no. You had better cast away such a thought. Besides, there are also some chances that this saintess may have some uses for the Joyous Palace's master, but the same may not necessarily similar to me. She's great for every practitioner, Grand Master. Tangan insisted. I once read the description of this woman in the Classics Library Pavilion. She once roamed all over China for many years in the past and then obtained a number of ancient manuals, one of which was a scripture that wrote the Frost Buddhist relic. I told you to cast away this thought already, and, Tangxiu replied in a deep voice. Tangan still wanted to argue back, but she eventually swallowed back her words upon seeing Tangxiu's sullen expression. But her stubborn eyes betrayed her and she seemed to have made her mind secretly. Tangxiu literally threw away the notion Tangan just told him. He had his bottom line. He may have used some means to achieve some purpose, but it never meant that he would resort to any means. It was the code and it was his bottom line. Even if he could return to the peak stage of supremacy directly after doing that, it was something he never wanted to do. Cultivation was not limited to one's physique but also the heart. His cultivation later would definitely be affected if he committed the deeds just like what Tangan said. Suddenly, his brows raised and he said in a low voice, that was interesting. This joyous palace saintess actually got incited by Ki Kitagawa. She's not stupid. She finally realized she has always been regarded as a tool. Tangan nodded. Though I pity her circumstances, she has no other option but to stand in the line of their ranks and fight side by side. She could have faced those 3 men who came later if she were to choose Ki Kitagawa. You've been guessing it all the time? Asked Tang Xiu. Yeah, but guessing is just that, a guess, replied Tangan. There's no point in it since I may lose face in front of you if I'm mistaken. Grand Master. Tang Xiu smiled lightly and said indifferently, it's fine with me if you don't say it, but I'll tell you mine. I need not guess. Once she has a choice, she may not choose the Joyous Palace nor Ki Kitagawa, but rather those Japanese genetic warriors. That's rather speculative on your part, Grand Master. Why do you think those people are not Kitagawa's underlings? Can't he just assemble such a force given his ability? Well, it's certain that he's someone from a certain state agency in Japan, replied Tang Xiu indifferently. Since he's a Japanese and Joyous Palace Saintess chose to side with those genetic warriors, isn't it the same as choosing Ki Kitagawa's side? Pursued Tangan. Not really. Tang Xiu shook his head. If she's really smart, and once she's sure that Kitagawa is someone from the Japan Authority, she's very likely to immediately find a way to leave fast. Though it's also certain that she may also think that even Kitagawa won't be able to do nothing to her once she pledges her allegiance to Japan sincerely. Isn't it much better to give her one more choice, though? Tangan asked. And, you had better not think of any foul ideas if you don't want to harm me. Tang Xiu squinted to her and lightly said, every decision I made has always been well thought out and I've analyzed the pros and cons. But what, Grand Master? Tang An's expression slightly shifted and pursued hurriedly. A smile sported on Tang Xiu's face. The but is, who could possibly live in this world without committing any mistakes? You can make mistakes, but you can redeem yourself and make it right afterward. That's always the greatest and most important virtue one can have. Words have it that those who repent and absolve their sins could become Buddhas right away. Besides, those who are weak always have difficulties to decide their own course of life and oftentimes possibly get trapped within by something. There's perhaps a chance for this Joyous Palace Saintess if she has Buddha in her heart. And that path is the Buddhist sect in China. Entering the Buddhist school and becoming a nun? Tang An's expression slightly changed and she exerted more strength to her nails, piercing her palm. The courtyard in the distance had been razed to the ground, even causing tens of houses in the surrounding to bear the brunt. Tens of families with over 100 souls fell victim and died in their collapsed houses due to the intense battle. Een Buddha's sharp eyes could easily notice those experts who came dashing fast. As someone who knew nearly everything about the Joyous Palace, he could instantly determine that these people were not on his side, which meant they were enemies. Please use the Soul Summoner Flute, Saintess. Joyous Palace Saintess, who just killed Ki Kitagawa's subordinate, suddenly had a change in expression upon hearing the sudden exclamation from Een Buddha. Her state of mind was rapidly changing. She even questioned her identity and status and thus wanted to leave the Joyous Palace for some time. At least, she must find a peaceful place to reminisce about her past and think about it. The present situation would give her an easy way to get out, but if the Joyous Palace were to summon all of its members in Kyoto, a more brutal war would definitely happen and it would be very hard for her to get away when there were so many disciples from the palace. At that time, what should I do? She suddenly hesitated for a while as those countless thoughts filled her mind. Een Buddha immediately tensed up and looked restless upon finding that the saintess didn't carry out what he asked her to do. He may be powerful, but he must escape when facing thousands of enemies regardless. What are you still hesitating about, Saintess? This time it will be either us or they who die and decide who's going to be the winner and loser. Een Buddha shouted. Chapter 1168, Bloody Battle. Tutu, tutum tu, tuti tum. Gritting her teeth, Joyous Palace Saintess finally lost her courage to choose to betray the Joyous Palace at this time and quickly took out a green flute and played some green notes. At this moment, several hundred Joyous Palace members in a 2,188 square meter radius in Kyoto, including 3 mistresses and 24 chess pieces, immediately put down all the issues at hand, regardless of their occupation or what they were currently doing. They rushed to the remote Tomoda district with aggressiveness and savageness as though they were going to face battle. The fight to kill was always bloody and killing frenzy was inevitable. Tang Xiu himself was unperturbed and watched the scene calmly. Such a level of battle and slaughter was something he had experienced countless times already. He even had his share of being involved in the frenzy battlefield millions of times. Tangin, who stood next to him, and the newly arrived Moao's group, however, looked shocked. "Isn't this way too frantic and frenzied, sect master? This is my first time as an observer in a battle of this scale," Shueisha said with a solemn face. "The environment you've been living is way too comfortable, so you got shocked by this minor battle. Which reminds me, it would be bad for you. Seems like I gotta arrange some huge battle scenes later. It will make you realize yourself well after you've experienced it." Moa and Shueisha shrunk. They didn't like fighting and killing if it wasn't necessary, let alone the battle that involved several thousand combatants. It was already crazy enough for them. They couldn't imagine what kind of scene would it be if the scale was much bigger than this. Tang Xiu's brows suddenly raised and he said, "Well, today's truly getting lively, though. Little did I think a small place like Japan had so many hidden experts. That makes me realize how happy the average people in China are." "Huh? Why do you say that, sect master?" Moa blurted with a confused face. "The number of cultivators in China is probably more than the number of people you're seeing here now. The number may even be several times more. But how many people are there in China and how big China's territory is? Don't you see how the average people there actually live happy, prosperous, and comfortable lives? What about Japan? Its area is much smaller, yet it has such a large number of practitioners as well as genetic warriors. What about the average Japanese, then? Won't they be oppressed and having a hard time to have such a happy life and peaceful work like those of their Chinese counterparts? To the best of my knowledge, Japan's economic development is very high, yet is aimed at a certain group of society. While it has a small territory and a large population, the disparity between the haves and the poor is like a chasm. The rich live in those spotless high-rise buildings, whereas the poor can only nest in their coffin room or family motel. Some even have to live in internet cafes. Kyoto, for instance, is a bustling major city with many immigrants. Yet they live in a few square meters room, squeezing themselves within a crowded and tiny place. Moa commented. Tang Xiu looked at him with approval. That makes Japan like an inhuman place where humans will devour their own kind. However, that's also the chief cause for such abnormal social deformities, especially the sex industry as you can see here, which I suspect is the work of the Joyous Palace's people. Whoosh! A hazy figure flickered from the distance. It was Kawako, who bolted fast to arrive before Tang Xiu and spoke with a beaming face. "The men I've planted all over Kyoto just reported the emergence of practitioners literally everywhere. They are highly suspected to be Joyous Palace's members, and all of them are now moving over here. I suspect it's related to the flute Joyous Palace Saintess just played." Tang Xiu wore a weird expression and replied, "Why do I feel like our operation is going too smoothly? We did give some leads to a certain Japan state agency, yet they just proactively kill each other without us having to get involved in the battle? Doesn't that mean my move of sending Miao Wenong to inform the Buddhist sect is unnecessary, then?" At a certain spot in the distance, Kikitagawa and tens of his remaining men were still engaged in the battle and encircled Joyous Palace Saintess, as well as preventing those genetic warriors from killing her, while the fearsomely powerful Yin Buddha and his 2 confidants kept slaughtering the genetic warriors without holding back. However, as would ants die for sweets, they kept swarming forward. This bunch of genetic warriors simply had lost their fear of death and fought with everything they had for a chance to kill or wound Yin Buddha, Yang Yi, and Yang. That was the main reason the trio was quickly scarred by wounds in just a little over 10 minutes. You both protect the Saintess and escape. Yin Buddha sent 6 genetic warriors to their deaths and appeared next to the Saintess quickly as he shouted to his 2 subordinates. In but a moment, both Yang Yi and Yang rushed to Joyous Palace Saintess's side. Wounds could be seen decorating their bodies, but they still kept killing these genetic warriors crazily. That was literally blazing their path out with a bloody road. The group of 4 frantically carved their way out with intense struggle for a few kilometers. Right as they were at the end of the rope, the Joyous Palace's people finally arrived. This first batch was small in number, only about a dozen, but it was enough to lift their spirits. Die. The killing intent in Ki Kitagawa's heart was multiplied by several folds upon noticing the arrival of the Joyous Palace's members. He had been preserving his power when fighting Yin Buddha, but this time, he finally made up his mind to kill the monk and his 2 subordinates without much delay and snatch the Joyous Palace Saintess. Striking in nearly a sneak attack fashion, the long blade cut off Yang Yi's hands. The blade then moved in a bizarre trajectory and ripped open the man's abdomen. Yang Yi's internal organs would have burst out and fallen had the wound been a bit deeper. Puff, puff, puff. 3 genetic warriors stormed over to the badly wounded Yang Yi, 2 of whom even held Yang Yi's arms when the man grabbed the neck of the 3rd one. Even several other genetic warriors accurately seized the chance and pierced him with their weapons. Yang Yi. Yang. Roared and was about to split up. He angrily slashed down tens of genetic soldiers and rushed to Yang Yi lightning fast. He quickly made a secret technique seal that doubled his strength directly after seeing Yang Yi's miserable state, and frantically strangled several genetic warriors to death before grabbing Yang Yi. Kill. Kill, and R-U-N. Yang Yi spurted out a mouthful of blood and directly died after leaving those words weakly. I'm gonna kill you all. Yang. Put down his body and went berserk as he stormed over to the crowd of genetic warriors around with fierce blows. But after killing a little over 20 people, the black-suited men with golden core cultivation level had him surrounded and trapped. At this moment, a thin weak figure suddenly emerged out of the blue in the midst of the crowd and his sharp katana pierced Yang's neck through the back. Farewell, Uncle Yang. The figure was a 10-year-old looking boy as he naughtily winked his eyes at Yang. Disbelief was all over Yang's face. He knew who this boy was. The little guy had been playing the role of Ki Kitagawa's son. Never did he expect that the little boy who he thought didn't have any chance to even pose a threat, now turned into his executioner. Time fleeted by. Thousands of souls were lost in the battle and the number of Joyous Palace's members kept increasing, resulting in the increasing number of trophies for the genetic warriors. After Ki Kitagawa and his men were successful in killing Yang Yi and Yang, the man was finally able to deliver heavy blows to Joyous Palace Saintess and took her away from the battlefield. You know, people change as day that change into rain is. Ki Kitagawa muttered while watching the scene of the battlefield. Joyous Palace Saintess coughed up a mouthful of blood and yelled angrily, "You are crystal clear on what kind of fate will you end up for betraying the Joyous Palace, Ki Kitagawa. Regardless of what your true identity is, you have been a member of Joyous Palace and even a chess piece. Just wait. You will face endless and heartless pursuit in the days that follow. Only death awaits you even if you run to the ends of the earth." No one knows whether the Joyous Palace can still exist until that day. Ki Kitagawa sneered. "You're talking about the restriction your Miyagi cast on me, ain't ya? Be disappointed, lady. I also got the secret technique to remove it back when I stole the blazing sky mirror." "You really have it?" Joyous Palace Saintess looked horrified and rapidly asked. The man just gave her sneer in response. He didn't reply and just waited still. At this time, the Joyous Palace disciples were gradually gaining ground, and the genetic warriors' casualties were increasing fast. Seems like you'll finally end up the loser, Kitagawa. The man watched her with a bizarre expression and said with a faint smile, haven't you noticed something yet? Why don't I look the least bit scared even in this situation, huh? The answer made Joyous Palace Saintess stared blankly as a bad feeling filled her heart. It's about time. You know, the number of Joyous Palace members in Kyoto should be no more than 500. And 400 of them are here. Well, let me satisfy your curiosity then. I'll tell you the greatest card I've been relying on. Having said that, he streaked up into the sky. Overlooking the fighting crowd below, he shouted, "Hey, time's almost up. What else are you waiting for?" The thundering voice directly pierced straight into the clouds in the sky. At this moment, the scene of fighting changed. More than 100 people from the Joyous Palace who had been fighting with the genetic warriors suddenly turned their weapons to their own side, catching their former comrades unaware and finally impaling them with cold blades. Why? With total disbelief on their faces, numerous badly wounded members of Joyous Palace furiously hissed at their former comrades who attacked them. Chapter 1169 Neither Side Wins. Buddha was confident in victory for his side and was as though he had seen the flag of victory waving in the wind, along with its glory dawning upon them. The sudden change, however, hit him unprepared. He would have been killed from the surprise attacks of 3 cold weapons if he didn't react fast enough, and was powerful enough to avoid it. Why? Lines of green veins protruded on his forehead. The killing intent in his eyes almost solidified. No matter how many people he had hated and wanted to kill in this life, never once the urge to slaughter was so strong as at this moment. A burst of ear-piercing insolent laughter was heard as a black knight-suited big man held a stick and grinningly said, "Why? How can such a stupid question be asked from you, Buddha? You really want to know why we betrayed the Joyous Palace and that damn old vulture? But you've given us lots of cultivation resources, though. Might as well as tell you that so you can be an understanding ghost later. Everything is for freedom." Freedom? Buddha said heavily, "You want to have freedom? Can Kitagawa or someone else give you freedom? Only death awaits those who betray the Joyous Palace, and don't forget about the restriction seal on you." The burly big man looked at him as though seeing an idiot, and even the smile on his face turned more unscrupulous. "That restriction seal, huh? Oh, no. I'm so scared." "Do you think we still dare betray the Joyous Palace if we still had that old vulture's restriction spell? Oi, the respectable sage, Buddha, we will make you venerable sage ghost so you can enjoy your time in hell. Brothers, fight and kill." The burly man's words nearly made Buddha cough up a mouthful of blood. Who would dare to speak to him like that in the whole Joyous sect save for the palace master before? "I'll kill you today." Taking off the string of beads he always wore, Buddha chanted and launched a technique as the beads abruptly streaked upward, forming a giant object with a diameter of tens of meters. Boom. Each bead ruthlessly bombarded both the genetic warriors and the Joyous Palace's traitors in the surroundings and directly exploded after the target was hit. Tens of people were directly killed with each strike. The burly man himself was hit hard by the bead's explosion, but survived as he had been able to avoid his vital parts from being hit. Just as he endured the pain and wanted to call his companion to fight Buddha, a sharp needle suddenly pierced his glabella. Thousands of Buddha's wrapping thread. Overlapping layers of arms constantly morphed and moved like palms and hands playing the string. Along with the movement of Buddha's fingers, threads were seen moving unceasingly even to the naked eyes, with a needle at the end of the thread shuttling back and forth to pierce the genetic warrior's vital parts. Blood flowed like a river and dead bodies littered the ground everywhere. The ballistic Buddha went berserk and was in a killing frenzy, as were the rest of the Joyous Palace members. Both sides were now killing each other in a frenzied state. Dead bodies kept piling up and the red color of blood kept getting more vivid while the Joyous Palace's members gradually gained the upper hand. Ki Kitagawa removed himself from the battle after having Joyous Palace Saintess under his control. The tens of sturdy men in black around him were similarly not in a rush to act. "Why has General Fukuda not arrived yet, master?" A burly man quickly approached Ki Kitagawa with a worried look. Ki Kitagawa snorted coldly and replied, "What are you being anxious for? General Fukuda is the one who masterminded the whole plan and mapped out the strategy, to begin with. He'll naturally appear with a strong army if the time comes. We lost too many people today, and I'm afraid we'll lose more people if this continues," said the big man with a forced smile. Ki Kitagawa narrowed his eyes and turned to look at the veiled-faced Joyous Palace Saintess. His expression suddenly shifted ever so slightly as he loudly shouted, "Hey, Ian Buddha. I urge you and your Joyous Palace's people to stop at once. Else, I'll kill your Saintess now. I'm hella sure you're crystal clear of how important she is for that old vulture. Stop." Ian Buddha shouted aloud after smashing a genetic warrior and sending him to his death. In that instant, both sides quickly separated, although their killing aura didn't recede. Each stared daggers to the other and a single order would make them re-enter the battle once more. Ki Kitagawa happily nodded and his eyes slowly swept toward the surrounding. A few seconds after, he shouted aloud, "Hey, Tang Xiu. I know you've been watching nearby with your men. You're also targeting the Joyous Palace, so why don't we cooperate now?" At a spot in the distance, Tang Xiu narrowed his eyes and watched the calm-looking Ki Kitagawa. He then turned to Kawako and asked, "Do you think we can cooperate with this guy, Kawako?" Kawako gave it a thought for a while before shaking her head and slowly explaining, "We have too few in number now and it's like dancing with the impossibility if we choose to cooperate with him. Besides, Kitagawa has been a member of Joyous Palace before. We have yet to fully figure out his details, so we can't place the gambling stakes on him as of now. I think we better let them devour each other and be the third party who reaps the benefits from the fight." Tang Xiu gave her an approving look and nodded. Coming to Japan was originally for the rescue, and only then the idea to expand the territory was raised up. Let's have some fun since Japan is so wonderful, then. Besides, even if we must cooperate with another party, it must wait until those Buddhist sect experts arrived. Shortly after, he issued an order to Kawako, Moao, and the rest to immediately withdraw from the scene, whereas he alone bolted over to the littered corpse scene. As he came at the spot about a kilometer away from the two people, he cupped his fists and loudly spoke with a smile. "Ki Kitagawa, you're the renegade of Joyous Palace and cooperating with you is rather impossible as the deal is too much of a risk to take. I won't take part in the hostility of both parties even though I have personal enmity with the Joyous Palace." "You wanted to get rid of me before, Tang Xiu. That had nothing to do with your private revenge either." Ki Kitagawa mocked him. "I know you've been trying to uproot the Joyous Palace and now the chance is before you. If you pass it and we face the Joyous Palace independently, it won't be easy for you to deal with them again later." The eyes of more than 3,000 people who were still alive now focused on Tang Xiu. Save for the few who knew a bit about Tang Xiu's identity, the rest was literally in the dark about who this desperado was. Expression turning ugly, Ian Buddha shouted in a heavy voice, "What enmity do you have with the Joyous Palace, brat? Who do you have a private grudge with?" "With whom I have a private grudge is something that the person himself is crystal clear about. Anyhow, you're called Ian Buddha, yes. I won't bother taking part in the fight between you both. Besides, I won't need to take action myself if my personal enemy dies in your battles either. Have another go if you will, never mind me." Ki Kitagawa deeply furrowed his brows. He wanted to see how strong Tang Xiu was. Rumors had it that Chinese cultivators had mysterious magical abilities, and if Tang Xiu had such a strong power, It was likely that he could thoroughly terminate this bunch of joyous palace hoodlums. You also know that the enemy of my enemy is a friend, Tang Xiu. How about complying with my request and you can have this saintess? Kitagawa directly offered his commitment. Nah. She doesn't interest me a bit and I won't accompany you to play. Farewell. Tang Xiu shook his head. After that, he flew away without turning his head and disappeared from the sight of more than 3,000 people's eyes in just a few breaths. Shortly after, Tang Xiu's fingers knocked on the table as he slowly spoke, and create some confusion there. It's best to kill a few of them as it will incite and stimulate them. It would be best if they continue fighting, but you gotta withdraw fast if they stop. A particular ripple of energy appeared nearby but then quickly disappeared without a trace. Puff, puff, puff. Several huge heads flew as Tang Yan's figure appeared in a flash and then disappeared again without a trace. God damn it. Yin Buddha angrily cursed and was furious due to the emergence of the mysterious assassin. He had used the Buddhist's reconnoiter technique as well as activated the heavenly eyes, yet he wasn't able to figure out the origin nor the combat power of the sneak attacker. Assassins on the spree. Careful of the enemy's assassin. Yin Buddha roared and no longer cared about the lone Tang Xiu who immediately left. He bolted to the enemy right away. He had grasped the upper hand in the battle and didn't want to let it go. He had arranged everything for Joyous Palace Saintess half an hour before, and was confident to rescue her no matter how astonishing Kitagawa's cultivation was. Suddenly, the red water drop mark on Joyous Palace Saintess appeared once again. Her imprisoned figure slumped as though the bones in her whole body were gone. In just a moment, she silently appeared on the chair on the other end. Rescue her! Yin Buddha shouted and led a group of Joyous Palace experts to rush toward their holy lady. Light reflected from the tips of their swords and weapons, even the images of Buddhas were launched and appeared in the fight. That was literally a bloody battle, one where the two sides sought to kill each other. Everyone was well aware that they would be dead bodies had they had no trump cards. The expression of Yin Buddha as he looked at the Joyous Palace Saintess figure that streaked up into the sky suddenly shifted, and he shouted in a heavy voice, "Some of you go and protect the Saintess. No accidents must happen to her." Understood. 8 figures complied and quickly rushed toward their holy lady's direction. Kitagawa himself was totally dumbfounded and now dumbly looked at the Saintess's back with an intense shock on his face. It was out of his imagination that the Saintess had the ability to escape in the last critical moment. Puff, puff, puff. Suddenly, a pair of darts suddenly appeared out of the blue as though they had pierced through the space barrier and were coming from another world. The darts kept hitting those who were chasing the Saintess to intercept them. Then, a faint voice was transmitted to Saintess' ear. Chapter 1170, Tang Yan's Selfishness. A phantom-like figure suddenly appeared in the air next to Joyous Palace Saintess. A pair of hands in black gloves grabbed the Saintess' shoulders and they both instantly vanished in a flash under their watchful eyes. Do not struggle if you don't want to die. Tang Yan's voice was passed into the Saintess' ears once more. The sudden change made the Saintess want to resist out of instinct. But a figure clad in a black robe appeared in her mind when the voice passed into her ears. It made her slightly change the trajectory of her palm when it was about to hit the person's body, and slightly change the trajectory of the sudden blow. Aren't you Tang Xiu's subordinate? Blurted Joyous Palace Saintess, pressing her voice into a whisper. Tang Yan moved extremely fast as she quickly withdrew from the scene. After explicitly replying to the Saintess, a few breaths were spent as they appeared a few kilometers away. At a certain place in the distance, an angry look filled Tang Xiu's eyes. Tang Yan unexpectedly didn't withdraw when she should and instead, braved a great risk to rescue that Joyous Palace Saintess. Without any shred of hesitation, he quickly bolted in her direction as he heard the Joyous Palace's Yin Buddha furiously roar and Kitagawa madly hurl out curses. However, he directly ignored them. He could clearly sense the powerful aura of many formidable experts rushing over to the scene extremely fast, some of which he felt wary of. Tang fled and bolted away extremely fast. A complicated feeling rose inside her when she found that Tang Xiu was pursuing her. It was her first time disobeying his command, but she firmly believed what she did was right. She didn't mind accepting severe punishment from Tang Xiu after this incident. She even had a feeling that her master, Gu Yan, would also approve of her choice. Being deeply in love with Tang Xiu, her master had been hoping that he could break through to the higher realm and become a much stronger person as he had been. Toshima Ward. In the midst of a cluster of buildings occupied by hundreds of thousands of ordinary people, a low-rise flat in the darker side of the high-rise building was a low-rise flat with a dilapidated courtyard. It was the base camp of tens of experts trained by Kawako. "Who are you?" The sharp voice came from a young man holding a katana, causing tens of experts, some of whom were at least at the late stage of foundation establishment, to jump over from everywhere instantly. Each one of them drew their respective weapons at the same time. "Draw back." Kawako took off her black mask and shouted after restoring her original appearance. The appearing experts immediately withdrew, leaving only the lean young man with the bleached red hair who quickly came to Kawako's front. He glanced at Moao and the rest behind her and then cupped his fists to greet her. "Pays respect to the master. Ryujin, activate the tortoiseshell net and monitor everything in a radius of 10 kilometers. Don't alert any suspicious people who breach the net but report to me at once. Also, prepare some drinks and meals. We're going to stay here for some time." Kawako ordered in a deep voice. "Understood." Ryujin complied and brought the only female in this place. They then quickly left the courtyard after he spoke to her. "Tortoise shell net? What's that?" I asked Moa curiously. "I have been reading lots of official and unofficial history records about the long history of China. I drew the essence from the readings and applied them when doing things. Some words I clearly remember said that a smart hare must have 3 burrows, be it for a getaway route or a safe house. This place is a secret safe house I built and I got 9 of them all over the capital and 20 of them in the whole of Japan. The tortoise shell net is the name given to the intelligence system, and once activated, it's equal to mobilizing a large number of intel operatives to monitor the 10 kilometers radius with the safe house in the center. We can spot anyone suspicious in advance this way." Moa gave a thumbs up in response and said with amazement, "You are more and more like Sect Master, Kawako. But I'm very curious since you rarely spent time with him, though. I may not follow him for a long time, but I learned tons of useful things from Sect Master, mind you," Kawako said with a faint smile. Shueisha raised his hand to interrupt their exchange and snorted. "Cut the chat and let's get changed. Let's eat and drink, shall we? The previous engagement kind of tired me." Whoosh. Whoosh. A few figures suddenly appeared out of the blue and shortly after, Kawako's cell phone rang. After seeing that the person was Tang Xiu, she picked up the call, chatted for a short while, and then hung up. "Sect Master, how come she?" Kawako and the rest looked confused and wondered after seeing Joyous Palace Saintess. Looking gloomy and sullen, Tang Xiu coldly snorted. "Come and kneel here." Tangin seemed to have already known that Tang Xiu would give such an order. She knelt, but stubbornness could be seen clearly on her face. Tang Xiu paid her no more attention and coldly observed the Saintess as he walked into the interior, heading to the staircase to the 2nd floor. As he came by the window, he folded his arms while looking at the distance to the direction where they had just come. He couldn't see what was happening there, but he could tell scenes of killing in the intense and bloody battle. Meanwhile, he sensed the Joyous Palace Saintess following him to the 2nd floor. She stood 4+ meters away from him. A long while passed by and finally, Tang Xiu slowly said, "You should be dead now, logically speaking." The Saintess herself never spoke after coming over. She just used her clear, rippling eyes to watch Tang Xiu's back. At this time, she slowly said, I could have been able to escape even without the meddling of your subordinate. Don't look down on the escaping technique of the Joyous Palace. Tang Xiu turned around and looked at her beautiful face through the veil. He sneered. Sure. But if my guess is correct, the battle over there is not over yet. Those tens of experts that arrived later are not from the Joyous Palace. Arrived later? Joyous Palace Saintess furrowed her brows and asked, what do you mean? And took you away from the battlefield, so you can't sense the aura of the new players. Do you really think Kitagawa is the top leader of Japan? Joyous Palace Saintess was not stupid. A look of dread appeared on her face after hearing Tang Xiu's words. You mean General Fukuda? The Joyous Palace has been secretly developing and expanding in Japan for so many years. It's inevitable that you'll give yourself away and be revealed in some aspects, to begin with. The people from a certain agency of Japan must have noticed already, even being wary and guarding against you. Even the person leading Japan's genetic warriors and those experts and ability users see you as a thorn in his eyes. I can tell he has long been wishing to uproot you. You've literally dragged out and exposed many of them this time, so how could they possibly miss this golden opportunity? The lady's lips squirmed but eventually didn't make any sound. Tang Xiu observed her and a faint smile appeared on his face as he asked thoughtfully, but then again, are you now still a member of the Joyous Palace? The Saintess' heart was immediately in a mess after hearing this. She could get where Tang Xiu was coming from. It seemed that Kitagawa was not the only person who knew that she had been a woman furnace for the Joyous Palace Master. Did Tang know about it too? Don't tell me you have the same intention as them? Suddenly, the Saintess realized something and stared at Tang Xiu as she asked all of a sudden. Wariness and vigilance were evident in her eyes. Tang Xiu shook his head apathetically. Don't treat me the same as them. Using a woman's body and cultivation to transform their own physique and improve their strength? That's a foul and dirty means I can never do. Chinese cultivators may not be allies of justice or such, but we're not that evil either. The Saintess inwardly relaxed, but she still vigilantly replied, but I still don't get it. Why did you save me? You don't get it at all, huh? Tang Xiu turned to look outside the window at Tang'an, who was still kneeling in the courtyard. The Saintess stared blankly for a moment and pondered about it for a while. Then, with a surprised look, she blurted out, you just punished your subordinate who saved me because you didn't order her to rescue me? Tang Xiu took out a cigarette, lit it up and replied with indifference, you're not that stupid. She now finally relaxed greatly, and her wariness towards Tang Xiu was mostly gone. She turned around and went downstairs. As she came to the courtyard and stood before Tang'an, she inquired. May I know whether you were aware that you'd be punished before saving me? Yes. While kneeling on the ground, indifference was all over Tang'an's face. The Saintess slightly furrowed her brows and asked again, the last question. Why did you save me? Would you believe if I told you that I felt like meeting an old friend the first time I met you? Tang'an hummed coldly. Her figure vanished on the spot, but the ripple of energy in the spot she had been kneeling was evident and everyone in the surroundings knew that she was still there kneeling. Upon seeing this, the Saintess sighed. You refuse to tell me the truth, so I won't ask you anymore. But I'll remember this benevolence for saving my life. I'll pay off this life-saving debt if you ever need Gongwan's assistance in the future. Farewell. You can't go. Tang'an's figure appeared again and said coldly. The Saintess' expression changed and she asked, you refuse to tell me the truth, so why I can't leave now? Tang'an was silent for a while and then asked, I need to take you to my master, or give you to those Buddhist sect people as Grand Master said. The Buddhist sect in China? Joyous Palace Saintess said in a deep voice, the Joyous Palace Master has long issued an order to hide at once if we meet anyone from China's Buddhist sect, or kill them if we can't avoid them. It's simply impossible for me to meet them. Also, who exactly is your master?